Good morning, class. Just need to do a quick register. So, Grant,
Here.
Nathan,
Here.
Jim,
Here.
and Todd.
Here.
Great. Welcome, everybody, to the Cleveland Browns head coaching school. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, in what is being dubbed as the longest head coaching search in NFL history, the Cleveland Browns head coaching search carries on, keeps going. I think we sacked Kevin, over 20 days ago now, over 3 weeks, I think. Still haven't hired anyone. This might be the longest head coaching search ever. We might not even have a head coach hired until February, depending on how this goes. Obviously, everything that's gone on with how long it's taken, how we've gotten here, all the stuff that's come out about, candidates cancelling interviews, the news that came out yesterday, or the report that came out yesterday from Tom Pelissero about how the Browns are giving out homework, personality tests, essays are involved in the Cleveland Browns head coaching search. So maybe that's why it takes a little bit longer than some of these other teams that probably just get a guy in and go, right, how many pieces of gum can you chew in 5 minutes? Cool, you're hired. It's definitely a more meticulous approach to hiring a candidate. And we will obviously get into that. But just wanted to give my kind of quick thoughts on everything that's gone on with the Browns coaching search over the last week. Obviously, in the last video on this, we spoke about, the guys that were kind of, essentially the finalists, shall we say, the candidates that were given second interviews, and obviously how they were going to go over the next week, etc., etc. We obviously had, as I mentioned, some cancellations that obviously people wanted to jump on. So just want to talk about how we've got to this point now and kind of my thoughts on it. Should we be panicking? Should we not? All of that stuff. So as I said, this all started with kind of, the Browns had their finalists. They had some second interviews scheduled. Grant Udinski, Todd Monken, Jim Schwartz, Nathan Shieldhouse, Mike McDaniel, Jesse Minter. These were guys that were all considered finalists and, were all given second interviews, scheduled second interviews with the Browns. And then it all kind of, I'll say that the jokes about the Browns and the piling on the Browns with their head coach search probably all started with McDaniel cancelling his second interview with the Cleveland Browns, which it was reported the night before he apparently took the Chargers offensive coordinator job. I don't think anyone actually knows yet. But it was reported the night before, the reporting was kind of framed as Mike McDaniel had just turned down the Browns. And, obviously that news gave a lot of ammo for people to go, laugh at the Browns, etc., etc. The Browns can't hire anyone. Not even the guy that was fired by the Dolphins wants to have a second interview with this team. And, that's kind of how it was framed. But as I said, it then came out the next day that he had actually accepted the Chargers offensive coordinator position, which meant he, because he was in the running, he had interviews scheduled for other teams. It wasn't just the Browns. So that confirmed that, it wasn't the fact that he had just specifically turned down the Browns. He had turned down multiple head coaching interviews and obviously decided to take the Chargers offensive coordinator job instead. My guess was, maybe he's not the biggest fan of some of these openings. Maybe he doesn't want to go straight back into being a head coach, take a year being an offensive coordinator, don't have the full responsibilities that come with being a head coach. Offensive coordinator for Justin Herbert, I'm sure he thought he could have a lot of success there. And then, you put yourself in a position to maybe get a better job next year in the head coaching cycle. That's kind of where I was at. And then it was reported that although he had accepted the Chargers offensive coordinator job, he was actually going to still interview with the Buffalo Bills for their head coaching job, because that's another opening that came in the last week since we spoke about the head coaches. The Bills fired Sean McDermott. Take that as you will. I'm sure a lot of fans were obviously clamoring for Sean McDermott in Cleveland when that news came out. I don't think that is a realistic approach. They've not even approached him for an interview, so I don't think that's something that's going to be happening. But obviously, as I said, so as someone that, could come out and say, well, I don't think this was just him turning down the Browns, him then, taking the head coaching interview with the Bills, kind of threw that back in my face. And even I put my hand up and said, okay, well, maybe he did just turn down the Browns. Maybe that actually was what happened. And then he decided to cancel the Bills interview after agreeing to the Bills interview, even though he'd already accepted the Chargers offensive coordinator position. So I think that kind of confirms that our initial thoughts on it were right, and that I don't think this was just a matter of, just turning down the Browns. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this was him saying that he wanted to be the Browns head coach by any means, but it wasn't just a specific example of him turning down the Browns. And if we're being completely honest, even though he was someone that was in my top 3 candidates, wholly wishy-washy. I mean, what is he doing? He can't seem to make his mind up what he wants to do. He's scheduling interviews and then cancelling interviews and then accepting jobs, but then taking other interviews, but then still cancelling those interviews. That is probably enough to take you off my radar. I don't want someone that's going to be that flaky in the process. I think that's definitely brought down a lot of people's evaluations on Mike McDaniel. Maybe it comes out, we get more context behind this, and I'll take all of this back. But just in terms of how he's handled this head coaching cycle and the process that goes into it, does seem to be quite odd. And I don't really know what he's trying to achieve. But that obviously was the the first domino to fall in what has become kind of the laughing at the Browns head coaching search. That was then followed, obviously, by, well, I say that Mike McDaniel cancelling his interview then meant that the Cleveland Browns didn't have another minority interview scheduled other than Nathan Shieldhouse, who, by virtue of the Rams winning the divisional round of the playoffs last week, we have to wait a week longer until we can have an in-person interview with him. So, then kind of all of the stuff about, well, the Browns haven't fulfilled the Rooney Rule. We're going to have to wait even longer. We don't even know if we're going to be able to get another candidate in here because we announced these finalists. One of them cancelled. What do we do now? Do we have to just go to a minority and say, look, mate, you're not going to get hired, but we need to run a sham interview? That's not something that the Cleveland Browns do. It's something that Andrew Berry, in his time here, diversity has certainly been one of the Browns' pros in that time. So I never expected AB to be someone that would just run a couple of sham interviews just to meet the Rooney Rule. And I'll be honest, whilst it can be framed as like, oh, well, I mean, the Bills, they fired their coach, 2 weeks after us, and they've already fulfilled the Rooney Rule. So I can understand why you can kind of look at it like, well, what are we doing? But as I said, when you've got a meticulous process like the Browns clearly do, when you have a front office that I think, likes to somewhat stand on their morals in this stuff and refuses to do these sham interviews. I mean, the Giants literally just basically fast-tracked Raheem Morris and Antonio Pierce. We all know why, and no one seemed to bat an eye. But I think that Andrew Berry and that seemed to have a bit more respect for the rule, shall we say. So, with all of that combined, it's not really something, if I'm honest, that I'm that concerned about because, even without the Rooney Rule fulfilled, they can, if they really want to, they can just hire someone. Like, I'm obviously not saying that, you hire someone and then you take, obviously, I mean, we've had one example of, I think, a team breaking the Rooney Rule. That was the 2003 Lions, and their punishment was a $2,000 fine. They didn't lose any draft picks, but obviously with the Browns being the Browns, even though, as I said, we're one of the most diverse front offices in the league, even though that 2003 Detroit Lions front office probably looked more like a snow globe, there's no way that we would just get hit with a $200K fine. We would lose draft picks because, as I said, we're the Browns, and anything the Browns do, let's make it 10 times worse than anyone else. So, but as I said, you can just essentially hire someone. We don't know if Grant left the building yesterday with a handshake deal that he's the next head coach. We don't actually know these things. You can agree to someone to be your head coach and then, as I said, do a sham interview to satisfy the Rooney Rule if that's really what you want to do and you need to do. But as I said, I'm not exactly that concerned about the fulfilling of the Rooney Rule stuff. I think it is slightly overblown. I think there's plenty of ways that you can criticise this head coaching search with how long it's taken, etc., etc. I just don't think the Rooney Rule is really one of them. as I said, this is a front office that is very diverse. This is a front office that isn't going to run sham interviews. They tried to respect the rule in the way that it should be implemented, which is actually giving legitimate candidates a chance, unlike what the Giants did. So, we'll see how this shakes out. I mean, if it does get to a point where, of course, they actually lose their number one candidate because they couldn't fulfill the Rooney Rule and someone beat them to it, then yes, obviously I'm going to start piling on them for this. But right now, I just don't think this is something that we can really criticise that much when you think about the optics of why they're trying to do it. But as I said, all of that kind of stuff. We then get news that Jesse Minter had cancelled his second interview with the Cleveland Browns, which, of course, everyone, after the McDaniel stuff, after the Rooney Rule stuff, after how long the head coach search is taking, everyone ran with that and basically used that example of why we should fire everyone, why this head coach search is the worst thing ever. Anyone that knows me and knows my Twitter account, my social media accounts, you know that that's just not how I operate. I am never going to, I think it's a bit of a stretch to take these specific examples. Yes, I made a tweet that, I think it's a little bit of a stretch getting angry about the Ravens' next head coach cancelling his interview here. And a lot of people, in response to that were, well, this isn't the only thing we can fire Andrew Berry for, and that's not what I was saying. I mean, there's, as I've said before, plenty of arguments you can make against Andrew Berry as his time here as a GM. I'm just specifically talking about this example where people are running with one guy cancelling an interview because he's going to become the Ravens' next head coach as an example of why this is the worst thing ever and everyone needs to be fired. So I think that was completely overblown. I'll be honest, I think that was ridiculous. As I said, it was so obvious that he was going to be the next Ravens head coach. That's why he cancelled the interview. What happens literally less than 12 hours later, he's announced as the next Ravens head coach. So that doesn't bother me at all. Jesse Minter, I said in my last video, I was actually surprised why he was even doing a second interview. It was so obvious that he was going to be the next Ravens head coach. People can say, oh, well, he's picked another team over us. Maybe the Browns didn't view him as that one of their top candidates. I don't know if we'll ever know that. But one thing I do know is that, if I was someone that didn't have any ties to either of these teams, I'd probably take the job that has Lamar Jackson over the job that has, checks my notes, Deshaun Watson, Dylan Gabriel and Shadur Sanders. So I don't think that's exactly the hardest thing to understand. But as I said, all these kind of factors, all of this news that was coming out over the week, this all led to a bit of an uproar. This all led to I'll be honest, the usual suspect, shall we say, running on Twitter, calling for everyone to be fired, saying that this is the worst head coach search ever, etc., etc. And before we get into the whole homework stuff and all of that, because obviously that's just a continuation of it, but the way that I'm kind of thinking with it is, well, I identified my favourite candidates at the start of this, and that was Grant Udinski, Nathan Shieldhouse, and Mike McDaniel. They were the three, my three favourite candidates. I then, kind of came to the conclusion that I think Nathan Shieldhouse and Grant Udinski are the Browns' top two candidates, and everything with how they've operated, everything we've heard from the team, etc., etc. Obviously, waiting on Shieldhouse, they obviously have interest there. It became quite clear to me that they're their two favourite candidates. So I say all of that to say, yes, it's taken longer than we would like to expect. Yes, there's been tidbits and news and reports that can point towards dysfunction within this head coaching search in a vacuum. But at the end of the day, if they hire one of Grant Udinski or Nathan Shieldhouse, it doesn't actually matter how we got here because they've hired their top candidate. So, the process worked, essentially. So that's why I refuse to get mad about this today at this very moment in time. Because they're two top candidates, the two guys that I believe are their top two candidates, the two guys that are my top two candidates, they're still in play for this job. So I can't sit here and say, well, this is the worst head coach search ever. This is absolutely terrible. We can't get anyone. We can't do this. Literally, the two top candidates are still in play. So, as I said, I completely understand the optics behind it. The optics are hilarious. It doesn't look great. I understand that. But at the end of the day, if they've gone through all of this process, they've been very meticulous about it, they've been very thorough about it, and they decide that these guys are their top two candidates and they land one of them, I just don't see how we can have any criticisms of the search, because it ended up resulting in what it was supposed to result in. So that's why I just refuse to get as angry as others, shall we say. Yes, don't get me wrong, I'm obviously going to make jokes about it. I'm going to post satire about it. That's what I do. I have to stress this so many times to people that half of my tweets on Twitter are satire, as much as people don't realise that. But as I said, we can have fun with it and all of this stuff, but I can't get to a point where I'm that mad when the top two candidates are still in play, in my opinion. So that's obviously everything that led up to, as I said, what we then got last night, which again, I think is something that on the surface level is hilarious. And, I'm sure plenty of people can run with it and say that this is embarrassing and all of this stuff. But, Tom Pelissero reported that the Browns have a very thorough process of hiring head coaches, which apparently dated all the way back to Dee Podesta coming over and joining the team, which involves, writing essays, personality tests, giving candidates homework that they need to do. So, if you do have a favourite candidate, just hope that they were good at homework when they were at school. And obviously, as I said, so when this stuff comes out, it's pretty easy to laugh at it. Even I made the jokes of it. Doodling, what was Grant Udinski good at his homework at school, all of that stuff. And, as I said, you can point to plenty of things here where you can say this is kind of embarrassing because no other team is doing this. But then, if I'm completely honest, you take a step back, you take off the Browns are horrible at everything hat that we all kind of have on because we're Browns fans. And I'll be completely honest, I don't think this is the worst thing ever. I mean, this is one of the most coveted jobs in America. This is one of 32 NFL head coaching jobs. We say all the time, people can say, well, there's a bad opening and this team isn't an attractive thing. There's only 32 of these jobs in the world. These are very, very, hard jobs to get. So am I that concerned with a team, wanting to do as much as they can, wanting to do as much due diligence as they can when hiring someone for one of those jobs? I'll be honest, I don't. I actually don't. As I said, on a surface level, in a vacuum, it sounds fucking hilarious. Giving Jim Schwartz homework to do. That's just so fucking funny to think about. Grant Udinski having to write an essay for why he wants to be the next Cleveland Browns head coach. That's hilarious to think about. But then, as I said, you actually take a step back, and I'm not really that mad at it. I don't think it's the worst thing ever. And I'll be honest, if this did start when Dee Podesta came in 2016, then that means that this process and what they do of this head coaching cycle, that resulted in wanting Sean McDermott over Hugh Jackson in 2016, which is anyone going to argue that would have been the wrong decision? I don't think so. And also that resulted in wanting Kevin Stefanski over Freddie Kitchens in 2019. Would anyone think that was the wrong choice to make if that was what they did? I don't think so. So I think there's precedent here to show you that this has actually worked in some extents. Sean McDermott in 2016 would have been the best head coach candidate. Kevin Stefanski in 29 to 2020, I can't even remember that. Yeah, 2020. Arguably they got the best candidate. You look at everyone that got hired that cycle, and how many of them went to the Cleveland Browns and had 2 11-win seasons, playoff win, etc., more success than the franchise has had in 50 years. Not many. So, we can joke and we can laugh and all of this stuff, but in the end of the day, if it's resulted in those, if it's produced those results, Is it a bad thing? I don't think so. And maybe it's because I'm too British. I don't know. But I don't think the idea of writing an essay is something that foreign. I don't think that's something that oh, wow, I had to write an essay. Oh, no. A high paying, coveted job wanted me to write an essay. Nah, can't be out. Like, I'm sorry, but that's not even a thing to me. That of course I would write an essay. Obviously, as I said, maybe I'm too British. I don't know, but I feel like any literate adult is going to be comfortable writing an essay for one of the 32 head coaching jobs in the NFL. If they're not, then I'm sorry, but I don't think I want you as my head coach. I know a lot of people prefer the football guy stuff. Maybe people would prefer that their kind of thing for hiring these guys. As I said earlier, how many pieces of gum can you chew in 5 minutes? How many people can you shout at in one breath? Maybe people would prefer that. But as I said, when you're going for a job, when you're offering a job that is as coveted, and people can say it's the Browns, it's not coveted, whatever. This is one of 32 fucking NFL jobs and head coaching jobs in the world. So that's coveted. Whether you say it's the Browns or not, that is a coveted position. I have no problem with them doing their due diligence and all of the extra stuff needed to do that if it's producing the right results. And as I said, if this was used in 2016 that spat out Sean McDermott, that was 100% the right result. This was used in 2020 that spat out Kevin Stefanski, this was 100% the right result. So I'm not that against it. As I said, it sounds funny. There's obviously plenty of stuff we can laugh about, and don't get me wrong, I can say I'm not against it. It has to include football. Like, it can't, anyone that's followed this channel for long enough, you will know that I'm pro analytics. I think analytics are a good thing to incorporate into sports. But that doesn't mean that it should just be 100% data-driven points. These essays, these personality tests, this homework and stuff, it can't all be data-driven. It has to involve football stuff, which I'm sure it does, but that's kind of my point, that I'm not against the process of it. I think that's absolutely fine, but it does need to involve real football stuff. It can't all be data-driven. It can't all be analytics. It can't just be numbers. There does have to be football stuff incorporated into this stuff, which, as I said, I don't know that. You don't know that. None of us know that. All we have is little tidbits on that they're doing this. And to be honest, we don't know if other NFL teams do this. It might come out that actually, now Tom Pelissero's reported this, maybe other teams are a little bit more comfortable admitting what they do, and maybe it does come out that other teams do essays or personality tests. I mean, the personality test is pretty much every job in every sector does that kind of stuff now, so that really doesn't surprise me. And asking someone to write an essay, as I said, maybe I'm too British, but that's not really that far-fetched for me. And doing homework, I mean, yes, when you just say it like that, doing homework, that sounds hilarious, but I think we all know that these candidates are going to be doing a little bit of extra work that they need to do when they prepare for these interviews. So, as I said, I don't think it's the worst thing ever. If it was used, previously that resulted in those correct results, then I don't think that this is the worst thing. If it results in them hiring Nathan Shieldhouse, Grant Udinski, in my opinion, it's done the right thing it was supposed to do, because they're my two favourite candidates. If it results in Jim Schwartz being hired, then yes, let's scrap the whole fucking thing and let's maybe try something else. But as I said, I'm not actually that much against it. I'm going to make jokes about it, don't get me wrong, but I don't think this is something that we can go, oh my God, this is another Browns are the Browns, worst thing ever that everyone else likes to run with. And I mean, who knows? Maybe the people that are against it didn't like school, perfectly understandable. Or maybe they just think that rich, people that are going to make a lot of money don't need to do any extra work, which I completely disagree with, and I think that's a stupid thing to have. But that's where I'm at on it. As I said, yes, there's frustrations. It's taking longer than we would have liked. Yes, if they've not fulfilled the Rooney Rule and the Bills interviewed Grant Udinski on Sunday and hire him because they fulfilled the Rooney Rule, and that was the guy that the Browns wanted, yes, I'm going to be annoyed about that. Yes, the homework stuff is funny, all of that stuff, but at the end of the day, if it gets you to the result that you wanted, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. If it was used in 2016, it was used right. 2020, it was used right. Again, if it results in Grant Dynasty or Nathan Shieldhouse being named the next Browns head coach, I think it did right again. So plenty of stuff we can laugh about, plenty of stuff that people are going to pile on the Browns about. But I think at this point, with the top two candidates, in my opinion, still in play, I'm just not going to get mad about this yet. But I do understand why, obviously, other people are. But let me know your guys' thoughts. Am I too laid back on this? Should I be more panicked? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Who's your favourite candidate? Are you Team Grant with me? Are you Nathan Shieldhouse? Are you Jim Schwartz? I might disagree with it, but I'm not going to hate you for it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. But as always, that would do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing weekend. Enjoy all of the funny stuff that is coming with this Browns head coaching search. As I said, when the Browns are involved, it's always going to be fun. We've even got an account called Go Browns that's claiming to be Jim Schwartz's brother or something. I don't know. He's brought a lot of fun to this. It's a lot of fun. Have fun with it, guys. And hopefully, this time next week, we're talking about the newest Cleveland Browns head coach. But thanks again, guys. Again, have an amazing weekend. And most importantly, go Browns.